Good evening, everyone, and we are back again with our finale episode of the anniversary special of the Leadership Spotlight series by Positive Vibes Consulting. It's been a year of 13 very good sessions with the best leaders of the corporate world on some tremendously value adding topics like leadership, future ready skills, workplace synergy, career transitions, HR being an employee advocate or business partner, and many, many more contemporary topics. As I have always said, this gratifying journey wouldn't have been possible without each one of you, the audience, for adding value and insights to our sessions and motivating us to come back every fortnight with a new episode. Last week, in our anniversary special episode, we had an absolutely power packed and a fun session with a very engaging and dynamic panel comprising of Gauri, Sahil, Vikas, Vivek, Raj, and Harini. And this week, we have another very illustrious, accomplished, and an extremely seasoned panel with us. I'm sure by the end of today's session, we all will have tons of takeaways with us. That's the mission of this series, to create a community of learning and sharing by listening to the wisdom nuggets of seasoned leaders. So let's get rolling and welcome our guests one by one. So, our first guest on the show today is the HR stalwart and an inspiration for all HR professionals, Dr. GP Rao. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be on this show once again at the anniversary event. Love to be in your shows. Love to go spend time with the co-panelist and your wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Your words mean a lot for us. And I'm seriously saying it because, uh, you know, uh, I have literally grown up, listening to your sessions, attending your sessions, and learning so much from you. So thank you so much for coming again on the show. Our second guest is the most candid woman leader I have ever come across in my life. It is Devjani Roy. No guesses here. Hi, Devjani.
Hello, hello, hello.
Welcome.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Shivani. I think won't be small to say that it is my a privilege to share the stage with so many absolutely august panel. And thanks to you, you bring us all together. More power to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, the third guest on the show today is a very charismatic corporate leader and a wonderful human being, Sunam Sarkar. Welcome, Sunam.
Good evening, Shivani. Good evening, fellow panelists. Good evening, audience. It's a real pleasure to be here, as Devjani said, and looking forward to a fun session.
Thank you. Looking forward to. Okay, the fourth guest today is a young and dynamic HR leader who believes in adding tremendous value to the fraternity through his HR shots, Atulya Goswami. Welcome, Atulya.
Hi, Shivani, and very, very excited to be a part of this panel today. And like you mentioned earlier, I've heard so many of our folks who are there on the panel, and I've learned from them. So it's really a privilege for me to be a part of this panel today, and very excited to be a part of this discussion. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Atulya. Absolute pleasure to have you once again with us. Our fifth guest, our fifth speaker today is a woman leader who believes in coaching and nurturing the human resources, Jayati Roy. Welcome, Jayati.
Thanks, Shivani. And I can say copy paste to a lot of you who've introduced yourselves here. Indeed, a privilege to share the stage and, of course, get to learn from so many August speakers. So thanks for this opportunity, Shivani.
Thank you, Jayati. Pleasure to have you with us today. And last but not the least, the man with love for adventure, whether in his personal life or his dynamic and immensely successful professional life, Rajesh Padmanabhan. Welcome, Rajesh. Rajesh, can you hear me? I think there is some audio issue again. Rajesh, can you hear me? Okay, I think there is some technical glitch at Rajesh's end. Nevertheless, so again, once again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking out time on a Friday evening and coming here, again, to have some fun and some serious conversations. And because it's celebration time, so obviously it's not going to be all work and no play. So let's start with some fun. So I'm going to ask some rapid fire questions to each one of you. And you have to spontaneously answer with the first thought that comes to your mind. Okay, ready?
Ready?
Okay, let me ask Devjani. Let me begin with Devjani. She was the first one to join today. Devjani, if you were to have your own late night talk show, who would you invite as your first guest? You're on mute. You're on mute.
So late night obviously means it has to be somebody slightly naughty by definition, but at the same time should capture the audience in every possible way. I think I'll have Donald Trump.
And why? Why is that?
Because he's somebody you can't be immune to. You love him, you hate him, you trash him. I don't think there are too many people who'd like to carry him home, but then he's got every attribute possible on this earth to rub you either the wrong way or to rub you in some way or the other, even well, metaphorically speaking. I don't want to go naughtier than that.
So it's like, you love him or you hate him, but you can't ignore him. So,
No, you can't ignore him. He's like a book cover you can't put down.
absolutely. Okay, good choice. But for the first one, it's going to get the TRPs really rolling. Okay, cool. Let's move on to Sunam. Sunam, if you could have an unlimited supply of one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, that's an easy one. Dark chocolate.
Okay, and why the dark chocolate? Is it because it's a stress buster, or just like that?
Dark chocolate has a lot of attributes. Amongst some of the tamer ones are that it has antioxidant properties. Some of the other ones I think are best not disclosed on a show like this.
I
It's a
like the
healthy
choice
chocolate.
of words. There speaks the fitness freak, Atulya. Okay, let me come to Atulya. Atulya, if you had to, okay, one Bollywood movie that you wished had a different ending, and what would that ending be if you were to decide the ending?
Sure, sure. So this is actually one of my favorite movies. So which released almost like few years back. It's a movie called The Lunchbox, and it's a very interesting one, which has Irfan who plays Sajan Fernandez and the actress Nimrat Kaur who plays Ela. Right. So it's a very very interesting story which has a very cryptic end to it. And you really don't get to know what happens eventually because they talk about the wrong train taking them to the right station towards the end, but eventually it's always cryptic that they don't really meet, and you're left guessing as audience as to what really happened towards the end. And everybody wanted them to actually meet or probably go to Bhutan together, which was the end state that they were looking at, and that was a very cryptic end to it. I would want to change it and make sure it's a happy ending, and both of them would have met and probably gone to Bhutan, which is gross national happiness for you, and everybody has a happy ending there.
Awesome. I think we all love happy endings. Like when I was thinking about this question and I was putting down and I was questioning myself, which is the movie that I would like to change the ending. And invariably, the movie Sholay came to my mind because I just hated it when
Yeah.
Amitabh Bachchan died and I did not
Yes.
want him to die and I wanted the happy. So I think this
Yes.
happy ending thing, we are all institutionalized to it somehow, I think. Okay, great. Let's move on to Jayati. Jayati, if you could hang out with any cartoon character, who would you choose and why?
Yeah, lovely question. Specifically because I have a kid at home,
That's why I
watching
asked you
cartoon
that.
all the time. Yeah, so I will keep some of the really terrible ones off, but still the old school Jerry is what I would prefer. Um and yeah, I mean, essentially a very naughty but nice character somehow, perpetually troubling someone, irritating someone else, but at the end of the day, there is no malice that I see in the character. So it's a nice, happy-go-lucky, having fun, having cheese, putting Tom
Yeah.
into trouble. So
Yeah.
that's that's the kind of character it is.
and always being smart enough to save himself from Tom. I mean, I
Correct.
can't imagine how
Absolutely.
a cat and a mouse can survive for so many years without the mouse being eaten by the
Yes.
cat. The cat
It's
has
only
to be really dumb
generations
to not
after that.
to not get to the cat. Okay, thank you, Jayati. Let's move on to GP sir. So, if you
Yeah.
could have any one superpower, what would that be? What would you want as a superpower?
If you, you are talking the power, yeah. If I had the power, if I touch illness, that will become wellness.
Nice, very nice.
I made it a bit serious, but then I meant it.
Very nice, but it's
Lovely.
a very nice thought
It's
to have.
lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very, very lovely thought. Thank
Mhm.
you. Rajesh, am I audible to you? Is your audio all right now? Can you hear?
I'm struggling a bit, but let me try. Can you hear me well?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
better,
can hear
better.
you. Yes, yes. Okay, so I'm asking the
Go for
fun
it.
round of questions, and my question to you is that if you had a power like Mr. India, okay, of being invisible for one full day, what would you prefer doing on that day? If you were to go invisible, people can't
Wow.
see you.
So I would possibly want to enter North Korea and see Kim Jong Un. That's number one. And right now, I would want to be in Putin's chamber to really try to figure out what's going on in his head.
Good one.
Good one. Good answer also, huh? Very contemporary according to what's
Yes,
going on these
absolutely. Yes,
days.
yes.
Okay, all right. Let's have a couple of more questions here. Let me go back to Sunam. Sunam, what's the most craziest thing that you have ever done in school? And you have to
Oh
be
boy,
honest.
it's so long back I can't remember. I'm an old man, Shivani.
I
Uh,
said the craziest thing, and we never forget the craziest thing. We could have forgotten everything else about school, not the craziest thing that we ever did. So you have to answer this one.
something called SUPW had just been introduced, socially useful productive
What
work,
to work?
and nobody knew what one had to do. So a bunch of us got hold of some paint and painted all the windows of our classroom. So the classroom was totally dark, and a teacher was welcomed into a dark room with everybody pretending to be asleep, and things went out of control very quickly after that.
And did you lead the pack who was painting? Did you get the supplies? Were you the
Let's
one
just
like
let's just say I'm a team player, Shivani.
okay, all right. That's so humble. Good one, good one. Okay. Let's move to Devjani. Have you ever said anything to your boss which you wish you hadn't said? I asked you this question because I know you'll be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to admit, I have couple of times. Um, can't say that I regret it because it never really came to that. But yes, I got to see a different color of the boss, which I had not anticipated. That's about, I can be honest about it, but these are you've really put me in a spot here because it's also a person I respect a lot, so I can't really go
Sure.
there. But then
We don't
you
want the
sometimes
names.
no,
We
no.
don't want the
You
names.
sometimes, I know, but what happens is you create an impression of a person because you're working with him or her very closely. But suddenly you popped a question which you thought was, just matter of fact or wouldn't really catch anything untowards. But it did happen that it rubbed somebody very badly and probably brought out something which he would not have wanted to confront himself with. So at that particular position, I saw a twist in the relationship. I actually saw the entire relationship undergo a change. And I'm sure if the person is watching, I'm not sure, he will know who it is I'm referring to. So, in the normal course, I wouldn't have taken that bite. But then it happened, so I had to live with it after that.
Okay. And are you still on good terms, like good with that person? Or how did the relationship pan out after that?
Slightly edgy, because I think he's wary of me.
Okay. Okay, good. That's very candid. And that's the reason I asked you this question. Thank you. Okay, let me move to Rajesh again. Rajesh, if you could bring back any fashion trend, what would it be?
If I were to bring back a fashion trend, Tough one, Shivaji. Really got me stumped here. I would love a sportswear to be worn on a Friday. I think I would love to mix wellness and lifestyle. So that's something which has always been a desire. So why not get into a full tracksuit and some kind of a colorful outfit on a Friday into workplace? I think that's something which I would love to do.
Okay, so the sportsman in you is talking here. We have
Maybe,
sports,
yeah.
the sports freaks here. Rajesh is one of them. Atulya, Sunam is a golfer. So we have a lot of sports people here. Okay, great. Thank you. That was well answered. But okay, last one. Whom should I pick? Okay, I'll ask this to Jayati. Jayati, if you had to delete all but 3 apps from your smartphone, which ones would you keep? Which ones would you keep? Only 3 apps you're allowed to have.
Okay. I'm thinking. You're so addicted to all of them, it's a very difficult choice to have. But
In order of priority.
in order of priority. Okay. So is calling button one of the app? No, it isn't. So probably WhatsApp I would still keep. That's a sustenance with my child's school, so you can't survive without it, and of course a source of connect. So that's probably one. Okay. Second, maybe a Swiggy, given given the lifestyle and food, of course. That could probably be a second one, and third is connected to the Fitbit. So maybe that would be the third one. So that monitors at least some fitness levels.
Awesome.
So it's not
So,
eating junk all the time.
it's so interesting that this question I had I'd gone to one of the B schools and I'd asked this question to the youngsters, and for them it was Instagram, Facebook, and I think Snapchat. They can't live without it. And look at, I mean, we all change with age. For us it's food. It's WhatsApp to stay connected, and fitness. So I think preferences change with age as well. But I like the food part. I would also keep a Swiggy or a Zomato. Good one. Okay, so those were some interesting facts about our guest today, some fun. And since we have such a learned and versatile, panel of seasoned leaders with us, the session is going to be absolutely incomplete without some insightful conversations around various dynamics of leadership. So I'm going to start, going around this virtual table here and ask some questions, to the panel members. So, Sunam, I'll start with you first. There's a buzzword in leadership which is called compassionate leadership, which is essentially, leading without authority, more of influencing and taking people along. Now, in that context, would you agree or disagree with the statement that compassionate leadership is necessary, but it is not sufficient? What's your take?
Good one to begin. Let me give you an allegorical answer. Many years ago, a friend and I had gone on a driving holiday in Scotland. And for the week or 10 days that we were there, we really enjoyed the driving habits of the English and the Scots. Extremely. Remember, we were going from India. So we were pleasantly surprised with all the rule discipline, lane following, etc., etc. Came back, and a week later, he calls me. He was living in Bangalore. I was living in Gurgaon. He calls me and says, "Hey, Sunam, you know what? For the last week or so, I haven't been getting anywhere." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, I came back with all good intentions of replicating the driving habits that we were following over there. And I find myself just waiting at every crossing, and nobody is allowing me to join the stream. Nobody is allowing me to join the island because I just have to poke my nose into any little space to be able to drive. So I think, to answer your question more directly now, compassionate leadership is very, very necessary, but it's not alone enough. It's not sufficient. One needs the authority to be able to steer the organization, the team, even individuals in a direction that you want to go. compassion, you can't do without compassion, but you need the authority to add on to that compassion, to balance out the compassion, to be able to take the team forward with you.
Absolutely. I think it's very well answered. We need a balance of the two. Any other panel member would like to add on anything to this particular question? Because this is something which is very
Yeah.
debatable. Yes. Yes, Dr. Rao.
If you call it compassionate leadership, you are saying that compassion and leadership. And Sonam has rightly said. So probably we can say that integrate business and compassion. So that is a leadership quality. So leaders who can integrate business and compassion, they will be successful. Those are the kind
Excellent.
of leaders we call them, and we can still call them compassionate leaders.
Excellent. I
Shivani,
think,
Shivani,
yeah.
my 2 bits to this, and I just couldn't help but pop in.
Yes, please.
These are all buzzwords today. We have transformational leadership, we have servant leadership, okay? We have authentic leadership, we have compassionate leadership. You name them, and we've got these parables all around. So I just, if I take a step back and I just wonder that which one of these can you actually say is not required for that position that we're talking about? I mean, if I be honest, there's a little bit of everything that needs to go into it. Yes, in some greater measure or lesser, depending on what the situation could be or what is the maturity levels that you're exercising in the organization of your choice or where you are. So for me, any of these is very relevant. And it's quite debatable, as you rightly said, whether one can do away with any of these completely, but it's just a question of probably getting the right mix in place. Otherwise, how can you ever say that a compassion can be taken away from the man who's calling the shots at the top of the building? So I think you need to look at it with a glass of balance and make sure that, given the position that that person is operating from, we've got the right mix happening.
Absolutely. I think the points that you've made makes a lot of sense, that it can't be, one style. It has to be compassion. Without compassion, like Dr. Rao said, it's compassionate and leadership. So compassion has to be a part of it. It doesn't mean, just, having the compassion part of it. I think it's something that people down the line also need to understand, that compassion does not mean, not being a taskmaster. I don't think it means that. It means that, you take people along, you nurture people, you grow people, but then at the end of the day, you also drive accountability. I think that's something that people down the line definitely have to understand. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Great answers. Okay, let me move to Rajesh. Rajesh, can you hear me now? Is my voice okay?
Yes, thank you. And I've come through my phone now. The other stuff is not working. This is much better. I'm able to hear you now. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So, Rajesh, you worked with so many Indian and multinational companies, and many times organizations focus on using one phrase called high potential. So and so is a high potential employee, somebody who's a good employee, employees that they want to retain. Now, for an employee who's not a part of that list, do you think there is even motivation to work towards being a part of that coveted list once you are branded as not being high potential? So my question to you is, how can organizations be more inclusive and redefine what people need to do to be successful, as opposed to believing that or assuming that only high performers can succeed? What's your take on this?
Yeah, sure, Shivani. First and foremost, I think let's understand performance and potential. It's stayed conventional for a very long time. It continues to be so. The principle of performance and potential is you pay for performance and you grow the potential. Having understood this, and we do the conventional 9 boxes and all, but this philosophy has got to be practiced well. The aspect of motivation is actually a cultural issue more than just a process issue. Now, whether you want to make it explicit or implicit is a choice. I would say, if I were to prescribe it, I would say, make it very, very implicit. Don't make it very explicit as far as going around telling people so-and-so is a high performer, so-and-so is a medium performer. You don't do it. But performance per se is visible across to the employees of the organization. It's visible. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe the rewards are not visible, but people know by and large. And that's a fair one because differentiation, so far as performance is concerned, is perfectly on, it's acceptable, and that's the way one runs businesses. Also, one needs to understand we are here for commercial purpose and we also act socially being responsible. Having
Yeah.
said this, let's come to the potential part of it. Now, potential, you did ask the question, how do you really, make this effective? Now, the best way to make potential effective is you make it transparent to the employee to say what's the potential with respect to the role that you're doing in terms of the role fit. So you do those classical spider webs and all of that, but make it visible. Don't keep it very, very specific only to the manager or to the HR. It's how you make it. So I'm doing this role, but my potential is being, I'm 60% fit or 70% fit. So I know my IDP has got to be bridged if I have to really make myself more effective. Having said this, when I also said about growth, how do you link that? A lot of good companies do it. For example, Unilever does it beautifully. So when you do a spider web, and if I have a target role, I know what are those competencies that I need, and I exactly know where I stand vis-a-vis those competencies. I actually make a development plan to get there. And that's the visibility part of it, and that's the culture part of it. Now, if you make this very transparent, I think it's fine. But let's live as leadership. Differentiation will exist. It has got to exist. No shying away from that fact. Because as it is, we're beaten down that there's too much of emotion and care that's coming into play, and performance is being soft played. So I think there's got to be a bridge. I'll pause here. I know I need to respect time.
Excellent insights. You touched upon a point of transparency. Now, that propelled me to think that often, in the organizations that I've also worked in, now we do consulting, for talent management. Often it's considered to be a confidential process. Why? Why is it confidential? That
Are you
I can
talking
ask.
about the
Yeah.
appraisal
So
process of being confidential?
the hypo, the talent management process, the list of hypos, the criteria of being a hypo,
Okay.
it's not shared with everyone. So what's your take on that? Or anybody in the panel? Rajesh, you can start, and then I'll
Yeah,
open it for it.
statistically, if you were to go to, see, it's a function of organizational maturity, and that's the reason I linked it to culture. When I say culture, what it really means is the organization mature enough to understand and take it by its stride. Typically, if you were to look at statistics, I think there's not more than 4 or 5% of the organizations which actually make it very public in terms of potential. Yeah, because it really spreads a grapevine, and you can't be democratic, you can't be socialistic in terms of performance and potential. You've got to make it very clear. But making it explicit, you're actually destroying culture. You're bringing in that stark differentiation very open. But when you handle it with respect to transparency and process, when you really open it down and explain to the process that you can why for getting there, but this is the process to get there, makes it much more of reasoning and a predictable journey. And people look at it as fundamentally also being right. And you need to work through this culture time and again. That's
Yeah.
the denominator. You don't stop there. You keep working on it again and again. The more and more communication you build, the better and better you get.
Absolutely.
Can I add my bit this on this one?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So in my experience, couple of thoughts here. So one is the fact that organizations, at least in one of my experiences, we do share that this is how the high potential assessment works, right? So it's important for people to really understand as to what are the drivers, and that's the starting point. So whether it's about drive for success, whether it's emotional intelligence or it's learning agility, so the different levers of high potential people need to understand. But let's also remember the fact that why it is kept as a confidential process sometimes is because people also change positions. It's not necessary that the same individual would be a high potential for life, because you do different roles, you take on different assignments, you are a manager of others, you are a manager of managers, right? So different career stages have a very different potential requirement, and the proficiency also keeps changing. But as long as the people understand and there's a healthy discussion encouraged between the employee and the manager to really understand where they stand in terms of potential, that's a very good developmental journey for anybody. So that is what I feel should be encouraged.
Awesome.
I think one of the things, Shivani, we also need to keep in mind, and that's where I picked up from what Rajesh shared. It very much has to echo with the DNA of the organization. Transparency is just a word, but if it is cultivated, nurtured, and completely executed across the organization, it becomes a part of that, a part of that DNA. Then it is
Yeah.
no longer just a word, it becomes a process, it becomes a significant journey that organization is charting for itself. Similarly, if performance needs to be one of the hallmarks and meritocracy needs to be one of the key kingpins around which you're actually developing your talent in every possible manner, then in the board meetings, your heat maps, which are typically used for succession planning, don't need to be undercover. It's something that can be very
Absolutely.
well be discussed amongst the group of CXOs, because they need to also understand what is their position in the hierarchies of the organization. Because in some of the top-notch organizations, especially in Google for that matter, I know for a fact, because I have a couple of people working in that organization, that the individuals are put on the spot and they're actually told that you are in second spot, and these are the competencies and the gaps by which you need to get to the
Yeah.
top spot. What are you willing? How far are you willing to go for it? Now, there in those organizations, transparency is a way of life. You don't really need to,
Absolutely.
even talk beyond it. And that is
Sure.
where, as rightly said by Rajesh, the performance and the potential can all be put into perspective and
Yeah.
practiced as very much the significant structures within the organization. Otherwise, you're playing risk. It's a
Yes.
very risk thing, and it is likely to crack a lot of the motivation as well as the intrinsic behaviors of organizational workforce, because they're not able to understand or fathom what is this all about.
Absolutely. I think I echo with 2 points here. One is the transparency part, which, if it's not a way of life, it's not a part of your culture, it's just a word. And secondly, I think, this transparency, a lot of times I have seen that people who are people managers actually struggle with having career dialogues with people. They don't know how to have career dialogues, and unless and until you don't have career dialogues with people, which the methodology that you just said, Devjani, that people need to speak to them, that these are the competencies and this is what you need to do to reach to the next level. I think uh, organizations probably need to invest time in training their people managers on how to have these career conversations. It's not something of power that I will recommend your name or not recommend that name. It has to be more of an inclusive process and a very clear process. Those are, that's just two nuggets from my experience. Dr. Rao, you wanted to say something here.
See, I have worked in a 100% confidentiality regime, that is public sector. I also
Ji.
tried out total transparency. In the process, we lost a unit head. So, and then, so I'm accepting the confessing. What we would recommend is parameters should be transparent. And once the selection has been done, communicate that the selection is over. People who are selected, they're communicated. I am not selected. I understand that I am not communicated. So this way, step by step, transparency has to be promoted. But the parameters
Absolutely.
must be. Yes.
Absolutely. Well said. There's a related question here from the audience. Mona Lisa is saying that, do companies somehow exploit employees with the carrot called high performing employee or employee of the year, etc.? It's open to anyone to answer.
Do companies somehow exploit? Yes, no, both the answers are there. There are some companies do this, and there are many companies don't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is pretty much part of the process of for any organization. So, and it's more like, as long as the intent is to recognize the employee, there's no exploitation here. It's actually a
Yeah,
good
that's
thing to
what I
do.
was saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
agree with
the
Atul.
other
Yeah,
side of it is that you don't reward, you don't recognize,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then so where do
Yeah.
you draw that line?
Exactly.
Which is a
absolutely.
bigger problem.
I
And
would
So,
not
obviously,
say
lot
choose
of
your
because
battles.
these
Choose your
these are
battles.
these are always parts of an RRR program in an
Yeah.
organization. Rarely
Yeah.
would you exist without any of these being echoed. So if you don't have it,
Right.
like Sunam said, where do you go from there? Then you'll have the whole lot of workforce shouting at the back of your mind, saying that this company does
Absolutely.
nothing.
yeah,
Absolutely.
This
So,
company does
absolutely.
nothing.
Shivani, just to add have humor to
Yes.
it, I was talking about retention. So it is detention actually, or a pretension of retention. So that's
Absolutely. Very well said.
Wow.
Absolutely. It's a
Lovely.
pretension of retention. I'll note that down. That's a very interesting term. Great. Thank you. I think a very interesting conversation there. Let me move on to the next question, and it's to you, Devjani. Again, you've been in multiple leadership roles and you've witnessed so many leaders in your journey. Now, in your experience, what's that most dangerous trait in a leader's career, something that can potentially do a lot of damage to their leadership journey, but something that they don't realize, and when they realize, it's often too late to retract? So what's your advice on some of the traits that leaders should consciously avoid in their careers?
Shivani, honestly, I have encountered many of these leadership styles, and I can knock off a few of the definite don'ts when it comes to exercising leadership. The first one that I would actually talk about, is this whole idea of drawing from micromanagement. I've seen a lot of the CEOs, right on top. They have all the credentials that they want to talk about for themselves, but when it comes to trusting and having faith in the right owners of the business, the stakeholders of the business, doing the right things, they are very suspect about it. So what they do is they start micromanaging, including the entire box of CXOs. They're breathing down their neck. They're questioning every decision that is being taken, and that can be absolutely cathartic for the organization at the top. So I think one of the key things that leaders should definitely stop doing is micromanage. When you've got the wanted leadership team, you might as well start by believing and trusting in them. The
Yeah.
second thing that I hate to say, cracks up the entire thing is procrastinating decision making. There's some inertia which hits you at the top. Okay, you would go all the way. There'll be meetings after meetings. You will be doing due diligences. You'll be taking out facts and figures. Now the buzzword is analytics. So you have analytics of all kinds being thrown around, whether it's HR, it's marketing, it's business, everything. You'll also have young, characters from the B schools coming and becoming your analysts and adding to the pool. But at the end of the day, what do you get out of all those meetings? Let's just think it over. Let's just do a bit more of this. Let's just look at a few more best practices. Okay,
Yeah.
let's look at what could happen as options. My dear God, how long will you procrastinate that part? You've got to take the risk somewhere, and especially in the face of competition, in the face of when structuring is getting affected, your business is actually getting hit at the bottom, you still do that procrastination. It is absolutely a sure shot formula for a fall. So the second thing is decision making. You've got to be agile in today's world. Okay, agile in the true sense, and decision making is the area where you need to demonstrate that equally well. And last but not the least, one of those guys who will always be at the top of the team when wanting to take the credits and show himself and his visibility and his voice out there, whereas the rest of the team is actually doing the work. Unfortunately, that trend still continues. So I've come across people who are so insecure at the bottom that the only way they can leave their mark, despite being the CEO and the joint MD or whatever they are of the company, is by voice, is by their voice power, is their lung power, being shown on the covers of journals, writing 10 articles. But when it actually comes to doing concrete work for the organization and taking it forward, because I really believe that those leaders who think of the forward and the future, those are the ones who actually lead the pack. They are the real ones who do the service for the industry. The others are
Yeah.
just playing the me too. So
Yeah.
these are the three definite traits which I feel leadership should definitely avoid, because not only does it not help them be the leaders who get respected at the end of the day, but it also just brings about a lot of cracks in the team, which takes a lot of time to heal and sometimes doesn't heal at all.
Yeah. I think brilliant
Shivani, can
points.
I
Yes,
add a
yes,
couple of
yes.
points here?
Yes, Atulya, please.
So I think to me, two of them would be very, very critical, and this is something which I've observed in my experience. So the first one would be listen to understand. So the more you go on the top, you have to be the last person to speak, and we keep hearing about this. When we see some videos and read some articles, but in reality, this is actually a challenge. So people like to listen to their own voice. They're not really listening, they're talking more. And so that is one thing which we should look at. And the second would be the ability to take feedback from anybody in the organization, right? And really implementing that feedback if it makes sense to you. Because a lot of times you see leadership assessments happening 360 degrees going on for leaders. There's a coach which works with them, but it's all a sham at the end of the day, right? Because people are not really ready to change their behavior. So if you're open, transparent, and really open-minded as a leader to look at that feedback in true spirit, I think that is something which can really help you. So listen to understand, and feedback, I think these two things for me.
Absolutely.
Shivani,
I think
can
the
I add
feedback
another
point, sure. Just one, point I want to pick from here. It's feedback. And I think a real leader would encourage feed forward also. It's not just giving feedback, it's
Yeah.
also about asking for feedback. But, while people talk about it, but very few leaders do it. And even
Do
if
that.
they do it, I don't know how much openness is there to accept what the team is saying. I think that's the whole journey that one has to undertake for being a good leader there. But excellent points, Atulya. Brilliant points, Debjani. I think micromanaging, procrastination, and taking credit, these are such obviously very dangerous traits that plague a lot of leaders. But till the time they realize it, unfortunately becomes very late, and it's difficult to then sort of retract. Yes,
And some
Jayati,
and some of
please add on.
and some of the good players at the top who are part of such leaders teams would not wait for donkey's years to actually get the
Absolutely.
leader, to start behaving differently. So what
Yeah.
happens is really the loss of really good players for the company.
Absolutely, it does. That's where attrition. Like the say leaders, people leave bosses, people don't leave companies. So that's when this whole thing comes to. Yes, Jayati, please add on.
So yeah, just a couple of points that I think is again a trait. One is the ability to unlearn, because by the time you've reached the leadership level, you've reached through certain ways of working and successes, and then you get ingrained in that. This is my way, and this is the best way. So
Yeah.
while we keep talking about learning, unlearning, it's not easy to unlearn what you've learned over 20, 30 years of your career. So I think that's one trait that you need to
Sure.
pick up faster, the ability to
Absolutely.
unlearn. And
Absolutely.
the ability to perpetually be uprooted by another person. So you should be in a position where there's someone else who can come and take your chair up. So
Brilliant.
having that openness, and being able to take that risk and say, hey, I am okay if there's another person who's better than me and can take up the seat. I think two extremely strong,
Excellent.
challenging situations, but
Shivani,
Excellent
insecurity
points.
takes over.
Yes, Dr. Rao.
my bit, we have done enough with the leaders. Ask them to listen. They don't listen to us. The leaders do not listen to our advice. The second thing, we have been giving them feedback. That feedback is important, but they are not taking the feedback. So now I am asking them the question: what are your three questions to your team members? So I'm saying that, okay, go and ask those questions to team members. Better listen to them. Probably this way they listen.
Okay, that's a
Can
good
I
strategy.
add? Can I add
Yes.
one?
Yes,
Yes,
Just
Rajesh,
one. I
please.
think that's an awesome round of contribution. But I think there's one blind spot, and which is a suicide blind spot. And I'll leave it at that. It's I know it all.
Yes.
good one.
Oh
I
yes,
cannot be vulnerable. Absolutely.
yeah.
I know
Absolutely.
it all. Wonderful.
Yes.
No,
Excellent
you could
insight.
you could be right, but I know better.
Well said, Rajesh.
I'm the boss.
And that's why probably I'll not listen to you. That's all linked.
Maybe.
Great, awesome. I think this was a fantastic, round of questions on leadership. Now, I'll move on from leadership to something that we had discussed in our last session, and we had an extensive discussion, with the panel around the phenomena of the Great Resignation in terms of various dimensions. But with this panel, I'd like to sort of delve a little deeper and ask how does one build good or great talent amidst this wave of great resignation. So I'll start with you, Jayati, since you are in a people leader role. We often hear about something known as exit interview. It's been done to death, which is done when actually an employee has made up his or her mind to leave. But a concept that's catching up these days is also called stay interviews. So being in the role that you are in, Jayati, do you think this concept works to retain people, and what should a stay interview be all about?
Right. So, being married to a doctor, I can also relate to the medical space, right? So, exit interview is almost like when you're in the ICU and they're trying to resurrect you somehow to put you into pieces and get you back. That's exit interview in
Brilliant
my mind.
analogy.
You're either gone or you're back.
I don't think
Uh,
anybody would have explained it in a better way. Brilliant analogy.
and stay interview is therefore, all of those steps that you're taking. So things that, we were talking about Atilya being the sports and fitness person. So steps that you take on a regular basis so that you don't land up into that ICU, that is stay interview in my mind.
Excellent.
So therefore the importance of stay interview, right? Nobody really wants to be in that situation of the ICU.
Absolutely.
So now, having said that, not too many organizations have actually successfully done stay interviews, but that's something very important. What makes you stay in the organization? What is it that's going well, and what can we replicate more of? So that's pretty much what the stay interview should be. A very prevalent concept in the Western world. I mean, it's a very easy conversation to have. Why we tend to dither away is the moment you sit with an employee and start asking these questions. If the maturity level is not there, you will find a plethora of, I want internet connection to, I want work from home to, those kind of hygiene factors would still keep playing up. The intent is to, of course, take it up a little more and start talking about slightly more mature topics around how can we keep you more engaged, how can we build a career out of you. So that's the discussion. Important is to note who is interviewing whom. So not
Yeah.
always the manager is the most effective person to do the stay interview. So
Absolutely.
when doing a stay interview, it's important to know who's interviewing the person as well. And more important than that is, after you've taken the interview, if there is a feedback, have you closed the loop? Because more often than not, we as a fraternity are also known for pulse surveys and taking feedback and one-on-ones, and so many times we reach out to employees, ask for feedback, but then what do we do with it? Unless we've really taken steps, you don't build that credibility, and if you don't build that credibility, that's just another
Yeah.
document that HR has gathered. So
Absolutely.
I
Very
think
well
those
said.
would be points that we might want to keep in mind. Who's taking the stay interview and what are you doing with the stay interview? Um,
Excellent.
so take time and do that session is what I would say.
Sure.
Shivani,
Great.
may I just add something over here?
Yes. Please,
So
please go ahead.
I think Jayati's made some great points, and I think what my fear is that line managers too often tend to put all of this as responsibility of the HR function,
HR.
whereas it
Absolutely.
needs to be a just to use Jayati's medical analogy. If this is an executive health checkup, which has to happen on a periodic basis, then the business must take ownership of this. HR can certainly facilitate the process, and HR can collate the feedback to be able to make systemic and organizational changes. But
Absolutely.
it cannot be the lead responsibility of the HR function if it has to be effective and if it has to work on a seamless basis.
Absolutely. I so resonate with
Yeah.
that thought.
Yeah.
I so resonate with that. Yes,
Yes.
yes, Dr. Rao.
This is a learning from another organization with 280,000 members. Every time a member renews his membership, he is asked to say why he has renewed, and he asked to say what he expects for his next renewal. So you get to know what makes you
Yeah.
stay and what will
Yeah.
make you stay further. They have
Absolutely.
institutionalized this. They have institutionalized
Yeah.
this. I
Yeah.
hope we can pick it up from there and put it in our practice in our companies also.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent.
if I can just add a genuine example, in 2016, stay interviews were the first ones that, as a CHRO, I adopted for SRL Diagnostics. That was the first time we experimented with it. We were having an almost 47% attrition at the front line, at the junior most levels. And we were going berserk using analytics to explain it all. But then, knowing it to that depth, the analytical part, it wasn't helping unless you put some counter strategies in place to make
Yeah.
sure that you were way ahead than just
Yeah.
doing the exit, which is really the burial
Yeah.
site. We used to call it the burial site. So what we did, and as Sunam very correctly said, it wasn't going to be an HR bogey. It was not going to be taken on our shoulder. So what we did was we actually put in place a complete program. It was a learning program where the first line managers, who were the supervisors of those frontline bodies, they were taken through a complete comprehensive training program on what are the kind of questions they needed to put through. They weren't even going to be questions, they were going to be conversations to pick up. Where could they do those conversations? Definitely not in the cubicles where they sat, but probably in a cafeteria or walking down towards the jogging track or wherever it was. So the whole orchestration of the stay interview bit was actually played out to the last limit, the last mile. And we were very successful to an extent in actually feeling the pulse of finding out who were the people who were sitting on the fence, who were the people who were beginning to feel the edgy part. It was not only about grievance, it was not about I don't have a good computer or something like that. It was more to do with, oh, I missed out on something and I feel it was nepotism, I feel that it was favoritism, I don't think it was done, so therefore I don't feel a part of this organization anymore. I'm beginning to feel alienated. The moment you got to get those feelings, you started work on that person. So I think stay
Yeah.
interview cannot be looked at in isolation. As Jayati said, it's really just before the ICU segment, okay, where you actually can move the bend away from somebody who's really going through the inflection point tomorrow, or to somebody whom you can bring back and make to see another picture. So, but
Absolutely.
it's definitely a strategy to play on. I personally experienced it to a great effect.
I completely agree, Devjani. And the reason I asked this question is because I have also seen it working in, one of the education institutions that I was a part of. We introduced the stay interviews there, and of course, you can't always have, attrition control linked to just one point. There were many other things, primarily the leadership, which had to be sort of changed and all of that. But believe me, stay interviews really helped us, because we could, before the person reached the ICU, just at the, before they even entered the hospital, we sort of, put them all right and we send them back. So if I was to use that same analogy, I think it really helps for people. I saw one comment here that people are not aware that it exists. I think it's a very, very powerful tool. If it is used in the right way, you can definitely address a lot of employee issues. I think it gives you a pulse of the people as well, what's going on in the organization, and accordingly, you can solve issues. Great. There are many, many questions coming here. I'll just pause and I'll put on some questions here from the audience. So we have Dr. Shweta Ghosh. She's asking that a lot of organizations are looking for talent with an entrepreneurial mindset. What is your idea about this trait of entrepreneurial mindset transforming workplace culture and bringing about the psychological contract? Would anybody like to answer this? Anybody from the panel?
Shivani, let me start, because I'm also reading the next question, which is from Mona Lisa, which talks about institutions dampening inspiration. And I think
Yes.
there's a good link between the two, because we really want that the inspiration of individuals, or the entrepreneurialness of individuals, to flourish in organizations.
Yeah.
If I were to go back to what was said earlier about, which Devjani said earlier, about three of the big issues which prevent us from being really good leaders, which is micromanagement, decision making, and claiming all success. Now you see the link between that and this. Those leaders are not inspiring others, and therefore saying that, oh, this is how it's done over here, blocking of the and that's where the institution is overpowering the inspiration of individuals. That's where we are not allowing entrepreneurial people to flourish. And it really is upon all of us as leaders to look inward, to see what do we want to do to encourage people to flourish. Do we
Right.
want to impose everything that we've learned upon them? Do we want an organization of our replicas, or do we value diversity? And I'm not using diversity in the currently fashionable sense, but truly in the sense of different ideas, different skills, different approaches to issues.
Sure. Anybody else would like to add
Having
on?
said that, I think
Sorry.
if I were
Yes,
to,
yes, yes.
if I were to
Yeah,
just
carry on, carry on.
sorry, Dr. Dal, just one word. If I were to just touch upon that word used by Dr. Shweta, which is psychological contract, I think that's too powerful a concept and a little difficult maybe for the common man or the common workforce in the organization to still get it. Even if today, in the common parlance, we were to look at the appointment letter as genuinely a contract of trust between the organization and the employee, even sometimes that is put under a lot of questions and a lot of a lot of skepticism is built around it in certain situations. So I think to be able to get to that point of building a psychological contract would again require a culture of great trust and faith, great amount of positive faith in the processes, in the systems, and all of that. Then only would be able to really champion the cause of entrepreneurship the way she is actually meaning it here. And I, for one, would love to have that level of maturity in an organization, and would go for it. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes,
Probably
yes,
when
Dr.
we say we want to recruit entrepreneurs, we actually see whether they have the entrepreneurial mindset. That's what we see in a student or in a
Yeah.
potential employee. So when they come here, what is one thing that make differently than a successful professional leader? Probably they have an edge, not that they do different things. One edge will be P&L. Even a leader takes, but then an entrepreneur takes at a higher plane. The second one is ownership. No, entrepreneur takes the ultimate ownership. A leader are 80% ownership, 90% ownership. That the second one. The third one, entrepreneurs also take the risk. They take that thing. The
Absolutely.
last one is entrepreneur looks at a long-term outcome and grow with profit. It's not just grow. So probably these 3, 4 skills or competencies, if a boy or a girl has, we should recruit them, ask them, encourage them to practice those in the organization. They become entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think, again, brilliant points shared, and I hope that answers questions of Shweta and Mona Lisa. I know we are running short on time. I'll very quickly move on. Atulya, I'd like to move on to you with one question here about upskilling. We've been talking about L&D, and now L&D is no more a perk. Programs training is not a perk anymore. It's a sustenance strategy. So how do you see the face of L&D changing henceforth? What kind of L&D programs should organizations imbibe, to keep the workforce engaged and to retain them?
So, so 100% L&D is very, very crucial for the organization. And I actually go on to say that today, if you look at the EVP or the levers which typically attract an employee to join an organization, would be, shall I have a great manager? Should I have a great brand to work with? It will also move towards saying that, is this an organization that will actually upskill me? Is this an organization that will actually give me those developmental or learning opportunities to have a long-term career? And all these things have got challenged over the last couple of years since the post-pandemic world. So we've started hearing this word called upskilling, which is just about adding additional skills, right? But it has been there for a long period, right? So if you look at somebody who's in the technical space, and you have to add on your skill sets around data, digital data science, add on skills to really have a long term career, it has been there all for a while, right? And this has become even more important because skill of today is not the skill of tomorrow, right? Things are changing very, very fast. Thinking about a career path exercise, so if and talking about the leaders that we just deliberated upon on various derailers we talked about. So when you talk about a guided career path for somebody, there are differentiated opportunities or different elements on the behavior that you need to work upon over a period of time. That is also upskilling, right? So if somebody is not really listening, somebody is not a listener, has to become a listener to succeed as a leader. That is actually upskilling. So organizations really have to have a program which looks into those elements. So for L&D, the game doesn't really change a lot in terms of the basic essentials. The game remains the same. I think it's more about customization.
Absolutely.
Companies have started looking at a co-creation model sometimes, because upskilling may not necessarily mean that I want to professionally upskill, right? Sometimes I want to develop something, right? More from an intellectual stimulation standpoint, I want to develop certain things as an employee. Companies are looking at a co-creation model where the employee invests some portion of it, the company invests some portion of it, and you feel good about it because there is a e-learning platform, or there are some other training programs that you can be a part of. But professionally, there is obviously a path which company creates for you. So this typically how companies are looking at, and very much a very critical strategy for any company to stay in the game.
Awesome insights, Atulya. I think customization is the key. It can't be one size fits all approach, but it still exists in some companies. But I hope that changes soon. Anybody else would like to add on to
I
that?
just would want to add one
Yes,
point,
yes.
particularly around upskilling. So, given we are talking about resignations, the talent scarcity, not being able to hire people, not being able to keep people, therefore, whether you want to hire and grow your talent or you want to keep your talent, upskilling is the only way out right now. And the way in which business dynamics are changing, unless you really get your existing workforce upskilled and moved up, you won't be able to keep up with the business dynamics too. So therefore, it's pretty much like the basic fuel that's needed to keep your business engine running. That's how important upskilling is. And
Absolutely.
apart from the various initiatives, and we talked about customization. I mean, today's generation is the ultra customized one, right? So you talked about Facebook, Insta, so everybody is on the click of a button. So getting into bite-sized learning into a customized mode is something that is also very prevalent and very commonly used. And the traditional methods of on-the-job learning, the traditional methods of mentorship, and reverse mentoring, which is another interesting concept, which is gaining a lot more mileage. So those are concepts
Reverse.
which one can toy around with from an upskilling.
Absolutely. I think reverse mentoring is something that is really catching up, and people are actually experiencing the value that it brings
Absolutely.
to the whole L&D space. Okay, great. There are too many other questions to the audience. I would have the panel answer them in the comments because we've already done 1 hour. So very quickly, 30 seconds round up here with a rapid fire on leadership. So 30 seconds, everyone, one by one, I'll go. Okay, Sunam, they say it gets lonely at the top. True or false? 30 seconds.
Not if you have a yogi somewhere in the Himalayas who can manifest himself at any point of time, or at least communicate with email. No, I think more than lonely, it is the fear of being isolated, as Tim Cook of Apple had said. And as leaders, you have to stay connected to make sure that you're not in a bubble or a cocoon of your own.
The bubble or the cocoon is the key. Okay, great. Well answered. Rajesh, top 3 leadership capability deficits that you see in the world of today.
Awesome. I work with a lot of consulting companies, top teams. So, 3 areas that I'm seeing very rampantly from a practice standpoint today, and this have got to be hard skilled. These are not developmental areas. I mean it, they've got to be hard skilled. Number one, digital. Yeah, because leadership at the top or decision makers, it's not being digitally literate or understanding a few things. You need to be really in tune with what's emerging technologies and really understand it well. Number one. Number two is change management is just an initiative. It's actually, you need the capability of transformation management. And I'll say a little bit more. It's all the big events that keep happening, and that capability and that DNA needs to be built. Transformation management is becoming a leadership capability. You need to know how to steer through big events. Number two. And the third one is the real wiring between the heart and the mind, the EQ and the IQ. How do you really get to high levels of emotional intelligence with a very solid realization that work is just a subset of life, and it's not work-life balance, it is life-work now. So emotional intelligence comes into play. These 3 deficits is what I'll play out.
Excellent points. Thank you. It's very well answered, and I'm sure a lot of takeaways for people, specifically in terms of what skills they need to build. Okay, Dr. Rao, your advice to future leaders of corporate India.
I always tell leaders that you must have followers. Otherwise, you are not a leader. So then they said, who is a good follower? A follower will follow you if he sees competence in you, credibility in you, character in you, connect in you, compassion in you, collaboration in you. Please have those so that followers will follow you. Then you become a leader. We continue to remain a leader. Thank you.
Very different perspective, very very different, and I'm sure there'll be more questions on this, but we'll take that up in the comments part. Okay, Devjani, what kind of a leader do you see yourself to be, the roller coaster kind or the merry-go-round kind? You're on mute.
I'm going to differ from both of them.
As expected.
I'm going to go back to Shakespeare and say, as you like it. So, depending on the situation, depending on the cohort, depending on who's around you, depending on what is expected and required, we would change colors and it'll be as you like it.
But what's your most dominant style? That was a mix of the two questions, but what's your most dominant style? What would you prefer?
What would I prefer? Well,
Okay, let me flip it. Would you like to report to a boss who's merry-go-round kinds or who's roller coaster kinds?
Well, neither. I would like to have. I mean, come on, a merry-go-round would be all over the place. I'm sorry to say that. A roller coaster would take you to heights but drop you down as fast as possible. That's how it operates anyway. So, from a mechanics point of view, I don't know. I don't see reason in any of it. But yes, taking a cue from what Rajesh just mentioned, I would like to go for a leadership style where there would be benevolence, definitely. So I would like to work for benevolence, where the right compassion, the right mix of empathy, the right mix of easing out and making life easy for people on the other side is definitely there. But at the same time, a very strong streak of knowing that this is commercial business. We are here to make, we are here to make it work, and we've got to bring in the intellectual ability coupled with the emotions and whatever intellectualism we have together to make it work for the benefit of the larger mass. So, not benevolent dictatorship, but definitely benevolent execution.
Awesome. I think that's very well answered, Devjani. Thank you. Jayati, do you feel women have it tough when it comes to proving your leadership mettle than your male counterparts?
Had you asked me this question 2.5 years back, probably the answer would still be a yes. The last 2 years, I think the whole ecosystem has changed completely. With the amount of flexibility that is available, the amount of stress is equally shared, and also we've all understood the role of empathy, and those the right and left brain mix. So I think now the situation is not what it used to be a couple of years back. I see a lot more women leaders coming. I hear of organizations reporting a 50-50 diversity balance. So what was the story a couple of years back with our generation, and with COVID, it's changed. And when I look at the future generation, I see them being a lot more open, lot more accepting, and allowing that equal participation much stronger.
Awesome, good to hear that. Since you're in the you're in a role which is into hiring as well, and which is into people management as well, and you yourself are a woman leader. I think it's good to hear these insights that things are finally changing. Great. Okay, Atulya, the sportsman in you, one sportsman whose leadership has inspired you, and why? And you're not allowed to take Dhoni's name.
Oh, you just took the name away from me. I was going to talk about
I knew it. That is why.
I was going to talk about. I call him the monk in blue. So that's MS Dhoni for you. I can't shy away from that, and I use that example multiple times in various programs that I do. So for me, number one leader, number one manager, whatever you may want to call him, many reasons. Stays calm, emotional intelligence, knows how to handle success. Success came very early in his career. Became a captain. Always humble, compassionate, great team player, was able to empower teams, build players, believed in himself, right? So everybody remembers the 2011 final. So coming ahead of Yuvraj, knowing that Murli is a tough nut to crack, on that track, and he can get Yuvraj out. He's got him out many times. Came out, has huge amount of self-belief, and last but not the least, knows when to be on the balcony and when to be on the dance floor. I think he's a terrific leader. He's an example of pretty much ticking all the boxes, if I have to put it
Absolutely.
that way. So,
And I think this is what we discussed today about compassionate leadership. So he's a compassionate leader, but at the same time, he got us the World Cup in 2011. So performance and compassion goes together. So I think a great, a great list of things. And I honestly, if you ask me this question, my answer would also be MS Dhoni, but I just thought probably I'll put a googly there. Okay, great. I think it's we're running short on time. It's already been 1 hour 10 minutes. A brilliant discussion with all of you. I'm sure today's audience, and there are so many comments coming in, that it has been a very highly value adding session. Thank you so much for taking out time, and I hope to see you back again. I'm not going to leave you all, so I'm going to keep calling you back on the show, and for more such insights. Thank you so much. Thanks to the audience for joining us. It's been great. Thanks for joining us on a Friday evening, and we'll come back again with another regular episode now next time on 11th of March with another speaker. Thank you, panelists. An absolute pleasure to be with all of you today.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks so much.
It was a
Lovely
pleasure.
getting together.
Very well spent.
Thank you,
Friday.
Shivani.
Enlightening
Great
session.
moderation, and thanks for hosting all of us. I mean, fascinating
Yes.
audio.
Pleasure is
Finally,
completely mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you
Thanks,
rocked like
Shivani.
a
Thank you,
current
everyone.
viewer, chat show, and you were the current viewer of the show. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let me end the broadcast here.